Hey everyone, I wanted to run a few things by you today. Um, the last video I had done was leaving that link for that video called Messiah 2030. So I hope you all have seen it. If you haven't, you need to watch it. It's very, very good, and it pretty much shows you, in my opinion, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Christ was died on April 5th, 30 AD, and ruling out 33 or 29 or 31 or other dates that people have said. And one of the things that he talked about was after starting in 30 AD, after Christ died and rose from the dead. Of course, he was the ultimate sacrifice, so they didn't need a temple anymore. Although the Jews didn't understand that because they didn't recognize what had happened. And so Jesus being the perfect blood sacrifice for all time, for all mankind who would believe in him. And so basically, there was a lot of miracles between 30 AD and 70 AD when the temple was finally totally destroyed. A lot of miracles, including at night when they would leave the lights on in the temple, and like every night something supernatural would shut the lights down, and then there was they would leave cords that should turn white, uh, showing that the sacrifice was pleasing to God, from red to white, but they wouldn't turn white anymore. They stopped turning white. So another thing was, I think the gates would open on their own, all kinds of supernatural stuff. And the other thing is that, and this to me really, when I thought of this, I'm like, this is so obvious, but God uses certain numbers in the Bible all the time. 70s, 70 years in Babylon. Seven, of course, is God's number. He created everything in 7 days. Daniel's 70th week, a week, 7 days, um, 70 weeks. I mean, everything's seven. And in fact, if you go through the scriptures, sevens and 70s uh, just come up dozens and dozens of times in God's calculations of so many things. Jacob um, worked for Leah and Rachel 7 years each, and everything's seven. The Jewish wedding's 7 days. I could go on and on, but, and another number, of course, is 40. 40 Jubilees, or 50 Jubilees is 2000, Anyway, so the video goes into all of these things, and how things that most of us know who are already believers about, the 2 days meaning 2,000 years, and 4 days is 4,000 years, and 6 days is 6,000, 7,000. The last 7,000 years will be the seventh day, the millennium, when Jesus Christ comes back to rule and reign, which I believe for sure will be in 30 and 2038, 2030, in 2030, in 7 years. And you subtract 7 years of tribulation, it takes you to this year, 2023. And a few of you were worried that the video, the person who made the video didn't believe in the rapture, it doesn't matter, because the point of the video was that Christ is coming back in 2030. And the other thing I wanted to mention before I forget is from 30 AD to 70 AD is 40 years. And God does, everything in 40s as well. Jesus was tempted for 40 days in the wilderness. Children of Israel were in the wilderness for 40 years. Jesus healed Lazarus. It was 4 days late. We got 4,000 years before Christ comes, and then 2,000 more takes us to right now 2030 AD. Okay, so 40 also is a big number, and anyway, so if Jesus died in 30 AD and the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, that's 40 years. That would be God's character. It'd have to be exactly 40 years and not, 37 or 42. I mean, that alone is perfect, that it's exactly 40 years, especially Jesus being the temple. Anyway, so that was one of the things I wanted to encourage you to watch the video if you haven't, because you know what? I'm completely convinced he's coming back then, and the rapture is this year. 7 years of tribulation before he comes back, which takes you to 2023 right now. Right after the whole Crown 22, which I went into last video. You've received your crowns. Crown 20, Revelation 22, last chapter in the whole Bible, talking about your rewards, the crown that you're going to receive. So basically, you completed that, and now it's time to go. And it's all making sense. And now I want to. Now it's interesting. Okay, if it's this year, which I just know that it is now. I've never talked like this before. If you look at my other videos, watch days are always watching, not like for sure. I feel this is for sure, and meaning this year. Now I'm going to tell you some reasons right now that I believe it should be, and I'm saying should because, to the best of my understanding, and what we're seeing in the Bible, I'm concluding that it should be, okay? It really should be by May 14th. And the reason why I'm saying this, there's a few things, but number one, okay, Acts 2:20 says, the sun will be darkened and the moon turned to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord. So we just had the solar eclipse, the hybrid solar eclipse that points to the Antichrist, but we're having a blood moon on May 5th at 11:13 a.m. Now, so I don't think the rapture would happen before the blood moon, because it mentions the sun and the moon before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Although that's only, a couple days away at this point. Now, I know a lot of people are looking at second Passover as that day. Like I said, I believe it's the first Passover, but I'm not coming against anyone who doesn't think that. I just think there's a few more reasons why it makes more sense. And I did come across something that made a lot of sense recently, which was just that back in the day, when things were not out of whack and out of order, things were more in sync, the sun would be in Aries, the lamb, for Passover, like I've talked about so many times with Moses and God telling Moses, start the year in Passover. That's the first month from now on. That's what he told Moses to tell the people. Okay, so people say, well, what about the harvest, the barley harvest? So back in the day, when things were in order and in sync, I believe it worked out that they happened simultaneously. And although they may not now, what clock does God go by? The sky? Well, I believe it's the sky because that doesn't change, but the weather changes on Earth a lot for the barley harvest. But the sky, the constellations that God put in the stars, that's fixed. That's fixed. So again, okay, so and the other thing too is the tetrads that we've seen where the blood moons have fallen on Sukkot and Passover, Sukkot, Passover, Sukkot, Passover, Sukkot. Well, the blood moon's falling on Passover again. So another reason I believe it's probably the first one, the first Passover. Regardless whether it's the first or second, it's a pretty big deal. It's Passover, a blood moon on Passover, another fulfillment of the solar eclipse and the blood moon before the great and terrible day of the Lord. This is lining up to what I believe should be happening because the 70th week of Daniel and the Shemitta year, that last Shemitta, that 7-year Shemitta year cycle, would be starting on Nisan 1, which is a couple weeks ago. Okay, believing that it's, like I said, the first month with the sun in Aries, which means that, you can see the trouble in Israel. They just got hammered with 100 rockets a couple days ago. The tensions in the world. Now, I want to also mention the fig tree generation too, before I forget that. All right, now, the fig tree generation. When, Jesus said, you'll see all these things before the end of the fig tree generation, which, of course, from Psalm 90, we know is 70 to 80 years. 80 years is what, we've already passed it if you want to calculate it from 1948. We've already passed it. And a lot of people keep saying that we're in the fig tree generation, but they're not explaining why are we past the 80 years if you add 7 years to 1948. If you add 80 years and subtract 7, it takes you to last year, 2022. We're past it, but we're not past it if you start counting in 1949. On May 11th, the United Nations received Israel as a member. And that was in 1949. May 11th is coming up. So that's another interesting thing, that it's just a few days before Israel's birthday on May 14th. But if God is starting that count of the generation that sees the return of Christ, because it does say the fig tree, when the fig tree puts forth its tender leaves. This is where this comes from. It's tender leaves. So there's more than just the beginning of Israel. It could definitely be the tender leaves starting May 11th, 1949. Now, and that should be the case because, quite frankly, otherwise we're past 80. We're past 80 years. So, but the good news is that we're still in it if this is the case, which is good news because the Bible has to make sense. The Bible it still makes sense, and therefore we can still count on it as being a reason that we're leaving. In this case, if you want to count the days, the years, I'm saying at this rate, we should be leaving before May 11th. If you want to really count those 80 years, okay? So now we have May 5th is the lunar eclipse. So between May 5th or 6th and May 10th and 11th, I mean, to me, this would fulfill the scriptures of the Lord coming back at the rapture, for the rapture to take us out. And you also have AI. They have these incredible, crazy, demonic plans for humanity in 2030. I mean, it's what it is really. It's just it's an imitation of what God's doing, because they claim to be able to make man immortal by 2030 and cure every disease. And I mean, it's unbelievable. Transhumanism, man would actually become a hybrid. That's their plan, a hybrid. Put a chip in your brain. I mean, but the amazing thing to me is that 2030. Why 2030? Because the reality is that when Christ comes back, those who are saved will be immortal. But the minute the rapture takes place, you're going to be immortal, but many will get saved after the rapture too. So wow, what a coincidence. This is obviously not a coincidence. It's another confirmation that Christ is returning in 2030. So if you haven't seen that film, video, Messiah 2030, you are missing out, okay? And the other thing too is that there was an assassination attempt on Putin by a drone, from Ukraine last night, and now the Kremlin is basically threatening a retaliation, but not going to tell you when, how, and where. And there's some nuclear implications. So basically, there's so much going on with the nuclear threats that it's getting so heightened now. Look at it's getting heightened at the same time of everything I just gave you. Everything I just gave you is pointing to this week. And yet at the same time, this is happening with the nuclear, not to mention the other, Taiwan and China, and it's unbelievable the level of tension, nuclear tension in the world right now. We've never seen anything like it. It's going to happen. And it really struck me too. 21-0 America is. I was thinking about it the other day. It's like, what did they really start doing the minute 2021 started? Well, 2020, we know it started, but the fact of the matter is that they didn't start really doing anything to people until the beginning of the very end of 2020. Now, that was definitely the beginning of the end. And the truth of the matter is that this country is going to be taken out in a nuclear war. Now, I am not. I just had another video taken down uh, by the people who run this YouTube, and I was like, "Wow, how did they catch that?" I did this. I've only done like a couple live videos since I started this, and so it's kind of a long video, and I barely talked about it more than a minute. And they found it. They found one word they didn't like, and took it down. So, folks, we don't have no freedom of speech anymore whatsoever. Um, if you can't see what's happening to this country with all of here's the thing. Except for the believers in Christ, you can see there's not a lot of protection over this country anymore. That's why you're seeing the constant explosions and train derailments. The banks are crashing. The food processor places are on fire, and then there's just the natural disasters are horrific. If you actually go and look at some of the videos and see some pictures of this stuff, it's a nightmare. It's nightmarish. If you're not under the covering of Jesus Christ by getting saved and believing in what he did for you on the cross, well, I don't know how people can, and yet they do. People still think everything's just fine and normal. They don't need anything. Don't need God. Don't need anything. America's fine because I can still go to the store and buy stuff, even though they're closing down one after another. And not only that, but the last thing I'll mention, I'm running out of time here, is the they're planning on going all digital. Now, the last I heard was in July. In this country, all digital. Okay, so that is obviously the way they're going to track everyone with the mark of the beast. Put it in your body, put it in your right hand or forehead. Unredeemable at that point. If you take that mark of the beast, you're unredeemable. You cannot ever get saved. You will go to hell if you take the mark of the beast. If you're out there and you're here after the rapture, do not take the thing on your right hand or forehead that they'll tell you you can't buy or sell without it. That's what you're dealing with. And if you want to get saved after the rapture, you will have to pay for it with your life and let them kill you. Wow, what times we live in. Just incredible times. I mean, I remember when I first got saved long time ago. Anyway, one of the first things, I got saved in the late 80s. One of the first things I heard about was the end times and the mark of the beast. And I felt like God back then was saying to me, I've called you for such a time as this. You're gonna play a part in the end times. And here we are, like a few years later. Wow. Was it over 30 years later? And look what's going on. Look what's happening. it was so real to me in the very beginning. It was so real. The devil's mark of the beast, everything. It was so real. Now it's really happening. And people still want to say in the comments, oh, nothing's happening. You think it's the end of the world. Blah, 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 blah. I feel sorry for these people. They can't even see what's happening when it finally is happening after we've been telling them for years what's coming. Now it's here, and they still either they refuse to see it because now it's here and they still want to mock it, refuse to see it. It's ridiculous. So anyway, I wanted to give you that, and yeah. So like I said, if you really think about all the facts I just gave you, to leave this week would fulfill the prophecy of the fig tree generation, the 6,000 years from 30 AD minus 7 years of tribulation, and the solar eclipse, the blood moon, before the great and terrible day of the Lord, all of these things, and then the blood moon on Passover, the Shemitta year starting, the 7-year cycle of bad, the 70th week of Daniel starting. All this stuff is pointing to right now. I don't see how we could not leave. I don't. So anyway, that's that. And take care. Try to tell everyone you know. Try to keep getting people saved. Tell people what's going on so they can, give them something to look at, like, the digital currency and all this. Just explain what it means, what's coming, because we really have to warn people about the mark of the beast, because there's going to be a lot of people after the rapture who will be here, and they have to know not to take that thing, because you will go to hell if you take it. There is no redemption after that. None. It will be too late. You can never get saved, and you will be in hell forever. And we really need to tell people that, because there's still going to be so many people that we can talk to right now will be here after the rapture. They will be here, and they need, because who's going to tell them then? The restrainer will have been removed. There will be so much evil in the earth. They're not going to have the comfort of watching a video and having people telling them the truth. They're going to be chased down with knives. I mean, it's going to be really horrific. You're not going to be able to get what you need. Everything's going to be like terrifying. You're going to see hybrid creatures. And yes, I realized from my last video, some of your comments, the Nephilim are real, and it's not like, they're here now. But what I'm saying is, after the rapture, you won't be able to mistake it, because they're gonna look very scary and creepy, and there's gonna be all kinds of different kind of weird stuff no one's ever seen. I mean, they're creating weird creatures in test tubes right now that are so scary looking. Like, you don't want one to fly by your window right now. I'm telling you right now. Terrifying. So that's what's coming. That will be what you see after the rapture. It's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be a nightmare. And we are about to leave. We are going to be leaving literally so soon. My time's running out on this video. Your time's running out. Get saved. Get ready for Jesus Christ coming back to take his people who believe in him to the place that they've been preparing for us. His Father and him have been preparing a place for us. Love you guys. God bless.